The call came in on a Tuesday, and the screen said Chidi Plus. And Adaeze Okafor, a woman whose Ankara suit cost more than cars, answered it the way she always did. "My girl, did you eat today?" Because that was the language of their friendship. Not hello, not how far, but did you eat? And on the other end was a small broken voice saying, "I'm outside your office." And Adaeze's face changed the way a sky changes before rain. When the door opened, Chidi walked in with her whole life in a plastic bag, thrown out by her landlord, rained on, 3 months of rent, and no one. And Adaeze did not ask questions. She pushed her into a chair, knelt in a miniskirt and red stilettos on a rug that cost more than the rent, held her hands and rocked her like a mother, like a sister, like the 19-year-old who once shared one plate of rice in a hostel with no light. And she said the sentence that built everything and destroyed everything. "You are not sleeping outside. Not while I breathe. You are my sister. Blood could not make us closer." And then she did what Adaeze has always done. She gave. A room with a window. And Chidi cried the first night not from sadness, from disbelief. A title, a desk, a salary. "You are not unqualified. You are unseen, and I will make you seen." 5 million naira seed capital slid across a mahogany desk, while Chidi shook like a leaf and whispered, "Why? I'm nobody. I'm nothing." And Adaeze knelt and held her face and said, "You carried me when my mother died. You gave me your last 500 naira. You carried me for years. Now let me carry you." So Chidi built. 5 tables became 10, 10 became 20, and 1 year later she drove her own small car into Adaeze's driveway and hugged her crying, "I did it, and it's because of you." And Adaeze laughed and said the truest thing she ever said, "I just opened the door. You walked through it." They drank champagne. They called it unbreakable. And the story, like all stories about unbreakable things, was already writing its next chapter. The fall did not start with Chidi. It started with a phone call that turned Adaeze's face the color of paper. 2 billion naira. Her husband, her company, her name. The EFCC came like a tide. Computers in boxes, files in boxes, her whole life in boxes. The gold emblem lifted off the wall while she stood and watched with dry eyes. And when Chidi walked in and dropped the tray, crash, and knelt and held her hands and said, "It'll be okay. I'm here. You carried me. Now I carry you." Adaeze believed her completely. She should not have. Because behind the concern, for half a second, something small and ugly woke up in Chidi's eyes and whispered, "She has nothing. She is nothing now." And it pushed itself down, but it never died again. 48 hours later, Adaeze packed 20 years into one bag, 2 dresses and a photo of her mother, and walked out of her own mansion and drove to the house she had bought in her friend's name with her own money, smiling, saying, "Put it in her name, she needs security." The papers were signed, the trap was legal, and the guest room had no window. It starts small, the turn. A laugh through a door at night. Chidi on the phone talking about new contracts, new money, the business growing while Adaeze's was dead. Then dishes, then cooking, then drop the children at school, then 2,000 naira left on the counter for generator fuel, handed like she was staff. And Adaeze staring at the note with red rough hands that used to sign contracts, whispering, "What have I become?" 2 months, that's all it took. For gratitude to rot into resentment. "We need to talk," Chidi said, arms crossed in the doorway of the house Adaeze bought. "It's bad for my brand," she said, "in the business Adaeze built. You have to leave. Tomorrow," she said, pointing at the door, screaming now. 20 years of being the poor friend pouring out like poison. "You made me feel small. You made me feel like a charity case." And Adaeze staggered like she'd been slapped, said the only inventory she had left, "I gave you this house. I gave you that business. I gave you 5 million naira." And Chidi said the sentence that kills every giver. "The house is in my name. You signed the papers. You signed them." And she had. At the door, Adaeze said, "Look at me. Look at me." And Chidi didn't. So Adaeze said the last thing she would ever say to her. "I carried you, and you watched me drown, and you stepped over me, and I pity you." The door closed, quietly, no slam, just 20 years ending. The shelter had 6 beds to a room and not one call on her phone. She washed other women's clothes for coins. She sold sachet water under the sun while people pointed and whispered, "Is that the fraud woman?" She kept walking. 3 months later, she was on a curb selling roasted plantain, hands black with soot, when a black Range Rover pulled up and the window rolled down. And there was Chidi, new dress, new jewelry, phone in hand. They stared at each other through the glass. The woman who gave and the woman who took. Guilt flashed and the window rolled up. The car pulled away, the plantain burnt on the skewer and Chidi didn't notice. 6 months later, Chidi cut the ribbon on a glass and gold flagship restaurant and told the cameras, beaming, "From nothing to this. This is what hard work does." While at the back of the crowd, balancing a plantain tray on her head, stood the nothing she came from. A reporter recognized her, and Chidi, her best friend since 19, grabbed his arm and said, "She's not anyone, she's just a vendor." And Chidi adjusted the tray and walked away into the heat, invisible by decree. On a bridge with the lagoon glittering below, an unknown number texted her, "I saw everything. She said from nothing, and you were the nothing she came from, and the everything she came from. The world needs to know. Will you talk to me?" And Adaeze looked at the water and the sky and her soot-black hands and typed one word, "Okay." She talked for 3 hours, not for revenge. "I just want someone to know I existed. I gave. I was real." And when the article landed, the friend I carried on my back, 500,000 shares, comments like stones, monster, wicked, she gave you everything. Chidi sat bolt upright in the bed of the bought house and went white, and ran to the bathroom and vomited, and sank to the tile floor and finally cried. Not for Adaeze, for herself, for the stranger in the mirror wearing designer earrings over a hollow thing. 1 month later, she came to the street corner, thin, wrecked, no makeup, no gold, eyes swollen, the same broken woman who once walked into an office with a plastic bag and stood in front of the grill trying to say, "I'm sorry," with her whole face. And Adaeze looked at her and felt nothing. Not anger, not love, not pity. The part that cared was dead and it wasn't coming back. "I'm not angry, Chidi. I just don't want to see you. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever." And when Chidi reached out and touched her shoulder, Adaeze flinched like she'd been burned and said the last thing they would ever exchange, "Don't touch me." And Chidi walked away into the crowd and disappeared. And Adaeze turned back to the grill and lifted her voice, "Alive! Roasted plantain, come and buy." The weight is still on her back. It will always be there, but she walks with it now, not under it. She is small, she is alone, she is nothing, she is everything. And her hands, the hands that signed million-naira contracts, that held her friend, that built an empire, that were thrown away, keep working, keep moving, keep living. 1 plantain, 1 naira, 1 breath. And that is enough. That has always been enough.